Welcome to Willow Oak's Value Hour. I'm your host, Jessica Greer, and I'm ever so pleased to welcome our guest, Shree Viswanathan of SVN Capital to today's program. Welcome, Shree.
Thank you.
Shree founded SVN Capital in 2018, offering investment services through separately managed accounts, and more recently launched a private partnership in 2020, focusing on compounders and special situation opportunities in the global market. Shree's background in corporate finance, business development, and mergers and acquisitions has equipped him to find unique opportunities across market caps, industries, and geographies. We couldn't be more thrilled to announce the newly formed partnership between SVN Capital and Willow Oak. Shree and his investment strategy are a great fit for the Willow Oak network, joining our other Willow Oak affiliates, Alluvial Fund, Arquitos Capital, Bonhoeffer Fund, and Focus Compounding, in offering unique investment opportunities to qualified investors. Shree, welcome to Willow Oak and to this special episode of Value Hour. So before we get into things, Shree, can you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on this call, Jessica. I'm delighted to be on this call, on this podcast. Thank you for your interest in me, and thanks to the larger Willow Oak team for having the interest in SVN Capital. It's a great starting question. To answer that question, I think it will be helpful to sort of connect three dots, connecting the past to the present, which leads to a little bit about the future. I'm originally from India. I came to the United States as a graduate student focused on accounting in the late 80s. After finishing my undergrad in math and physics, I switched careers to go into accounting back in India, finished the CPA equivalent, and arrived here as a graduate student. This was way before I even had heard of Mr. Warren Buffett and his recommendation to students interested in investing. Apparently, he had said that accounting is the language of business, and that's the one area of focus that he would highly recommend to people interested in investing. I'm delighted I chose that path. In the early 90s, when I was working as an accountant in an insurance company in Des Moines, Iowa, I know what you're thinking. Accounting, insurance, Iowa, can this guy's life be any more interesting than watching grass grow? But this was a fantastic opportunity for me. As an immigrant, intensely focused on, succeeding in life, this was a great platform. Worked hard, learned a lot, made some great friends. In fact, a few of them are actually invested with me today. And that was a fantastic launching pad for me to learn about investing. Specifically back in the mid-1995, my cubicle was right next to the investment team's cubicle in this insurance company. And the big news at that time was Warren Buffett's acquisition of Geico. Now, I had not heard about Geico, I had not heard about Warren Buffett, but that sort of somehow instigated a spark in me. And I distinctly remember that being the start of my interest in corporate finance. I then decided to go to the University of Chicago for my MBA. Ended up as an investment banker, starting my career at Alex Brown in Baltimore, Maryland, then moved over to San Francisco, to Thomas Weisel Partners, and then later on worked as a corporate development executive at a bank, Union Bank of California. But over the last 18 years, I've been back in Chicago working as a portfolio manager, analyst on a couple of different, very storied Chicago-based investment firms, Advisory Research and Keeley Asset Management. So that's a little bit about the past. And after having spent such a long time in this industry, I've learned a lot about the positives and negatives, the skeletons in the closet. Decided to set up a fund, and that's primarily because I've always wanted to do something on my own, and decided to set up this fund that was devoid of many of these negatives that I had observed over a stretch of 18 years. That's a little bit about what I'm doing today. SVN Capital, it's a global fund, long only, focused on investing in quality businesses with the intent of generating capital, healthy capital, essentially doubling capital over a business cycle of about 5 to 7 years. As far as the future is concerned, my focus is on making sure that this fund remains nimble, relatively small, with an intense focus on providing great returns for investors over the long term, with an investment committee of one.
Absolutely.
Hope that gives you a little bit about my background and how I think about this.
Yes, no, super helpful, Shree, and what a fascinating story. And it's still being written, which is really exciting, especially. So, Shree, this strategy is available through both separately managed accounts as well as the fund structure, the private partnership under SVN Capital. So what are, and you've mentioned that the portfolio is certainly overlapping, if not identical in both structures. What are your operating principles, and what are some of the goals that you've set for yourself?
My objective in putting these vehicles together is to invest like a business owner in companies run by responsible, competent, honest business owners with the capital of investors who think like business owners. So what does that mean? Number one, even though eventually I will own only a small percentage of a particular business, I imagine as if I own 100% of the business. That helps me focus on the most important aspects of investing. The people running the business, those that I will be associated with over a long stretch of time, the long-term compounding potential of the business, and everything that is associated with analyzing that, the balance sheet, the financial leverage, everything that is associated with that. So that's number one. Number two, companies with responsible ownership, well-designed interests, well-aligned interests, that tends to generate superior returns. And number three, all of the above, will not matter if the actual investors in my fund draw their funds at the most inopportune time. Times like February, March of this year when market went into a tizzy. So I would like for the investors to have a fairly long-term investment approach. And that's what I mean by investors who think like business owners. So that's the primary operating principle upon which I have designed the portfolios, both in the separately managed structure as well as in the partnership. The long-term objective, as I had mentioned, is to be able to generate a very healthy return for the investors over a long stretch of time. I'm reminded of the philosopher Zig Ziglar. He mentioned if you do not have an objective, you are likely to hit it every time. And so my objective here is to be able to double the investor's capital over a business cycle. Typically, the business cycle lasts anywhere from 5 to 7 years. Of course, the most recent cycle that ended in March had run for a lot longer than that. But on an average, a business cycle runs from 5 to 7 years, which essentially translates or computes my statement into a return of somewhere between 10 to 15% over a long stretch of time. That's the objective.
Wonderful. So, Shree, where do you generate your investment ideas?
I wish there was a sort of a cranking machine where I could just go crank and the ideas would come out of it. That's not the way it works, unfortunately. So this entails a lot of both quantitative and qualitative work. Quantitatively, I run a number of different screens. I use Capital IQ as my database, which gives me access to publicly traded companies around the world. And I run a number of different screens. So that's the quantitative aspect of it. But the fun part of it is on the qualitative aspect, where I end up reading a lot, talking to people, other managers, management teams, reading a lot of people's letters. And so ideas come out from both angles. And I think it is worthwhile to sort of highlight, at least as to how I foresee this relationship with Willow Oak sort of helping me in that regard. There's a fantastic book by one Mr. Chris Bailey. He wrote a book called The Productivity Project. It's a lot about time management, how to think about effectively using the most important resource, time. And in there, he says the mind is not a place to store information. It is a place to sort of generate ideas. And as I think about joining hands with Willow Oak, I hope to be able to lop off informational sort of responsibilities to Willow Oak, which would hopefully free up a lot of my time to think about ideas, spending time thinking about the portfolio, talking to management teams, investors, and current investors and prospective investors.
Yes.
So
that is our goal as well, Shree.
That's a little bit about how I kind of generate ideas. Some ideas marinate for a lot longer period of time. So, for example, one of the companies in the portfolio today is a company called Copart. It's one of the largest salvage yard companies in the country. In fact, it's one of the largest salvage yard companies around the world. I'd been monitoring this company for more than 10 years. In my previous two places that I worked at Advisory and Keeley, we owned Copart. And recently, during this February-March turmoil, when the market went down approximately 35% in 33 days, this was one of the stocks, one of the businesses that I had been keeping an eye on, and I was able to pounce on it during that period. On the other hand, there are other ideas where it doesn't take 10 years, but it would be a matter of a few days or even a few weeks before I make a decision, either to add it or to pass on. So that's a little bit about how I generate my ideas at this point.
So Shree, what are your investment criteria?
I'd say, there are four important issues that I look for when I am thinking about deploying capital. First, is the business within my circle of competence? It sort of entails analyzing a number of different areas, but the important point is, do I understand the business? That's number one. Number two, the quality of the business. I'm looking to deploy capital into high quality businesses that, number one, have the ability to generate great returns, and number two, have the ability to reinvest such returns over a long stretch of time. So long-term investing potential and long-term reinvestment potential. That's number two. Number three is the business run by competent, honest management teams with skin in the game, with good, reasonably attractive incentive program and compensation structure. Number four, is the business available at a reasonable valuation? As a value investor, I am absolutely committed to deploying capital into names that are attractive, long-term opportunities, but I'm not necessarily looking to buy an inferior business which may be available at what may look like cheap price. I'm looking to deploy capital into quality businesses, which not necessarily are cheap all the time. So those are my four criteria that I look for before deploying capital.
Shree, where are you currently finding your ideas?
This is a fantastic platform where I'm able to deploy capital on a global basis. Let me take this opportunity to sort of also explain one other important point. When I say global, I'm not necessarily talking about investing capital into businesses in, say, Mongolia or Nigeria. My investment focus is sort of governed by this accounting regime, U.S. generally accepted accounting principles, or IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. So that sort of, funnels the opportunity set into U.S., Canada, Western Europe, and some developed Asian markets. As you know, Jessica, the valuation in the U.S. market has been inching up steadily, ever so steadily, even though September appears to have been a little bit rocky. And so in my exercise, I'm finding slightly more opportunities outside the U.S. In fact, as we speak, I'm working on a company in Australia and looking at one in the UK. So there are slightly more opportunities outside the U.S., but the opportunity set in the United States is the deepest and the most transparent. So I believe at any point in time, U.S. will continue to be a well to dig ideas from.
So Shree, tell us, who do you admire and who are the people that have most influenced your thinking over the years?
A lot of different types of people have influenced my thinking. As an investor, I've evolved from being a classic value investor into what I am today. But I'd like to cite late Mr. David Heller. He was the founder of advisory research. Much of what I know today is, teachings from him over a long stretch of time. I also learned the business of asset management from the former CEO of advisory research, Mr. Brian O'Brien. But I've also been influenced by a variety of other types of investors. The usual names, Warren Buffett of the world, Charlie Mungers of the world, and also many of the eminently dead. For example, Warburg, John Pierpont Morgan, Bernard Baruch, Vanderbilt. So a variety of different types of people have influenced my thinking, and I am continuing to evolve.
Let's talk about today, where you are today, and why Willow Oak, Shree?
That's sort of an important question for what we are talking about today. Much of business is about people. The quality of the business could be something, but the quality of the business is maintained by the quality of the people. I've known, Steve Keel, who has put this wonderful platform together. I've known some of the other managers, Keith Smith, who runs Bonhoeffer. Jeff Gannon is somebody that I have followed for a number of different years. So the quality of the people is number one that jumped out as soon as I started thinking about reaching out. And number two would be the professionalism with which you, Steve, and the entire Willow Oak team has approached this process with me over the last few weeks. It's been enlightening to understand how to think about developing a business and growing it over a long stretch of time. And number three would be the hope is that the ability to sort of hand over a number of these day-to-day responsibilities, operating, compliance, marketing, technology, all those types of responsibilities to somebody like you and your team, and be able to focus on idea generation and return generation over a stretch of time. So those are the three key points that I would say that led me to Willow Oak.
Well, thank you for that. Absolutely. And that's our goal, fund management services. Our goal is to partner with you managers to keep you focused on where you are best suited to be focused to benefit your investors as well. So we are really looking forward to working with you. So with that, can you give us a little bit of insight into what you plan to do now that you'll have some extra time on your hands?
Absolutely. I remember Warren Buffett and Bill Gates sitting across the table from Charlie Rose back in the days when Charlie Rose was running interviews. And in that interview, Buffett made a very important comment. He said, "I can buy anything I want in my life at this point, but one thing that I cannot buy is time." It's absolutely true. Before I launched SVN Capital, I knew the challenges of being an entrepreneur and growing a business from scratch, but the time commitment that it needs, a variety of different angles, has become a lot more clearer over the last couple of years. So a big focus of Willow Oak and your team to be able to take on that responsibility is going to absolutely allow me to explore a lot more of the investing world. Much of what I do on a daily basis is sit and read books and materials and a variety of different types of reading material. And so allowing me to kind of do more of that, taking me back to that point about this book by Chris Bailey that I made, where the mind is a place for idea generation. I just think that giving up all those administrative responsibilities would allow me to do more of idea generation.
Well said. Well, as I said, we are so excited to partner with you, and we appreciate the trust that you've placed in us as well. And we look forward to a long, long road ahead together.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm certainly looking forward to a very long relationship with Willow Oak and SVN Capital. And thanks for giving me this opportunity today.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of Value Hour. We look forward to keeping you updated on SVN Capital, as well as the other funds on our platform. Until next time.